Just so everyone knows, it's 5:30 and we have started the webinar and started recording. David, if you are there, could you also make sure that you are recording as a backup?
I am here, Courtney. It shows that you're recording and I don't see where I can record a duplicate. So
Okay.
I only start recording if I lose you guys.
All right. You should go to your computer. Okay. Testing? Yep, okay.
Tracy had an 8
Oh, yeah. Oh, cool. Oh, those are for steering committee members.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah. I think only people on the steering committee have name tags.
I just asked if she had one.
No, she does not.
No. You don't have one, Tracy. No. All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Hopefully everyone online can hear me as well. Welcome to everyone. It's good to see us somewhat in person and hybrid. That being said, I'm going to ask for everyone's grace tonight because, as you know, technology can be really awesome, and then sometimes it can be a little troubling. And so as we're experimenting with our hybrid option tonight, if we have some technical difficulties, just hang in there with us. If you are online and something happens, stay online, and David will be with you and we'll continue your conversation. And we will try to connect back with you and get us back hybrid if something is to happen. And then other than that, we will be following up with everyone tomorrow, just kind of asking how this worked out, any feedback that you might have. And again, this is the first time that this type of hybrid setup has been put together by the city. And so we are playing with it as we go. So again, your grace will be really important as we work through this. One of the things that you'll notice tonight is that the chat is cut off. The chat is cut off because we want everybody talking, because people who are virtual watching won't be able to see what we're doing here. So we want everybody to be vocal. Everything's being recorded, but that way everybody can hear. So if you're online and you're with us virtually, when you have a comment, please come off mute and share your comment. That way, everybody who's with us can hear. I want to also just recognize any elected officials that are with us. If you're with us tonight, thank you for joining. And then before we do anything else, I just want to take a personal point of privilege on behalf of the steering committee and myself. I'd like to have a moment of silence for Jerry Grimes, who passed away. Just want to send love to her family, just recognize and acknowledge her just amazing contributions to the community and to the steering committee as well. And if you would just join me in a moment of silence for Ms. Jerry Grimes. Thank you. Tonight, we have a pretty heavy agenda, and we actually have 11 folks signed up for comment. So that's about 22 minutes. I'll do my best to make sure we have enough time for all of the public comments. But then if we don't have enough time for everybody, we'll make sure that those individuals are carried over to the next meeting. And we'll also, they also would, if interested, can send them an email as well. So we're going to get going so we can maximize our time this evening. So what we've got going tonight, first we're going to have a community navigator report. Then we're going to go into our process overview. And then we're going to look at the draft plan recommendations and have a discussion. And then there will be an activity with that. And so for the folks who are here in person, you will be participating in the activity on the boards here. And for those who are virtual, you will be participating in the same activity online using your Miro boards. And so please do make sure that you're logged in for that. And then I know we have some processors, and you know, if you're still really thinking about something, you haven't quite made a decision, on June 30th, we're going to have a public meeting where this activity is going to be done, and you can come back as steering committee members and add your comments there at that time as well, especially for the folks who are virtual online and not with us in the room.
What's the venue for June 30th?
Oh, yep, we're gonna get to that. So June 30th will be here. And I'll go over that when we conclude at the end, but June 30th will be here. Any other questions or just so you know, bathrooms, if you need them, are out the door to the left. Is that right? Yep, out the door to the left. And there's some snacks on the table if you want those as well. So that being said, again, it's good to see everybody. Thank you for being here. Again, thank you for your patience and grace as we navigate the hybrid terrain tonight. And we're going to get started with our community navigator report.
Hello, this is the right person. My name is Anna Jackson. I am with Information and have been running dialogue circles for this purpose. So our navigator overview, this kind of gives you an outline of process, what we do, how we do selected. I also wanted to questions or thoughts or concerns about any of those things, you can visit our website online. So our community navigator engagement summary, we did host 2 dialogue circles every month, one in English and one in Spanish. And that was from March to May, so we just concluded our last Wednesday. Navigators also additional 30 one-on-one conversations with those who were able to participate in the dialogue circles. So everybody had an opportunity to people had an opportunity to engage if they were missing those dialogue circles or just generally wanted to reach out and be part of that process. So there's a couple of in addition to member engagements, historically and questions. last round before I came on to NCI, there's also, my first project was Latinx outreach. So that was my first project coming on to the NCI. And so going into the second round, we're very intentional, making sure that we represented everybody's voice at the table as inclusively as possible. And also those who don't typically engage in these processes because they don't know, they're not comfortable with the time of the work. Usually those are sitting around the farm shop, schools, things like that.
And we've been asked for you to speak up. I think that the people who are virtual are having a little bit problems hearing. So just make sure we're projecting our voices when we are talking.
Is that's what's picking up all the voices?
Yes.
There is a bar on there, so you can see how loud you're talking. I can't really register my voice.
Okay, great. So I just hosted a dialogue circle earlier today with some team and I said loud and proud, so loud and proud. Some of the input that we got from the community, and this is all preliminary information, we still have some information coming in from one-on-one conversations, also translation information that's coming in, so all of this is very preliminary, and nothing is complete at this moment. But some of the major things that came out in these discussions are listed as you see. So the first one was welcoming and inviting environment for current and future residents. And this was voiced in a lot of different ways, very loudly. So there's a strong desire for community-led process to benefit current residents. So those who are already here, who have been here, who have raised their families here, who are second, third, fourth generation here, they want to make sure that they are part of this process through and through. Cultural and historical representation throughout all of the development. So from start to finish, they want to be a part of the process. They want to know how to be a part of the process. They want the information to be a part of the process. And so they're also looking for better outreach methods from kind of the collective, all of us, right? And that also includes being respectful to what they're doing at Old Parkdale as we transition into this new phase of Parkdale, and making sure that there's a cultural ease into this new space. So there's a lot of reference to like 5 points and how they don't want to build that. They want to build part of this space and include in this space, and then it's meant for them as well, for those who are going to be coming into joining the neighborhood. So both indoor and outdoor community gathering spaces are accessible and affordable. So that's pretty self-explanatory, but the outdoor space is pretty interesting. So there's talks about an amphitheater where they can host community gatherings. They even reference the Montbello Rec Center has like all this beautiful space and an open concert space and space for kids to play basketball and have sports and things of that nature. So they're looking for something like that to be developed potentially here. And also indoor space. So I don't know if you've ever tried to rent space in Parkdale, but it's pretty hard and it's pretty limited. So a large gathering space, whether it be a hall, whether it's building, a lot of this building actually represents a lot of history and memories for the folks in this neighborhood. And so even preservation of this space was mentioned and encouraged, or even like broadening the space, making it wider, more, a little bit larger for people to host larger events. A lot of people talk about weddings, baby showers, and that nature held right here in this building. Thank you. Architectural cohesion. So this was really, really important. We began a conversation around, hey, what about residential space? What does that look like? What about density? And they're like, first and foremost, this needs to look like it's been a part of Parkdale, all of Parkdale. They want to see an evolution of Parkdale and not just new Parkdale, old Parkdale. And they're very, very adamant about making sure that even the architects still can't hear me.
Thanks, Mohammed.
Sorry. The architecture piece.
And the feedback.
Go to the
So I'll just start today. Yeah, you can put that back.
ready to get on? Can everybody hear me? I hope so. So the architectural cohesion piece was very, very important. Again, it's not having brand new, modern, buildings just kind of plop into Park Hill, but some type of cohesive blend from, this established Park Hill into this new development. Even in terms of like spacing and the size of buildings. So having things closer to the old neighborhood that feel inclusive of who's here, whether that be the businesses or the type of residential spaces, like 3 stories closer to, I guess it's the east side of the park, looking at a map, so that it feels like it's a cohesive part of the neighborhood, and that the neighborhood is being kind of amplified and not just redone or remade or repurposed. So that was a strong point that came out when it comes to the architectural convenience. Understanding that like the issue like the brick yards that used to be in Parkville, why so many homes are built of that material, was pretty interesting to learn as we went through this process, how important that is actually to people who are currently here, and even those who are trying to come back. The next thing that came up was inclusion. That was a big word, right? But the main thing that came out, or not main, but the first thing, a lot of things was the prioritization of previously displaced communities. So people who used to be here have been priced out of the neighborhood, have been pushed out of the neighborhood. They want to re-engage those people and bring them back home. And so how do we create something to make sure that they get kind of first dibs to come home? Whether that's through policies or however they're going to build that into the space, they want to bring people back home to where they were. Stronger support of the prioritization for policy for future affordable housing. That's such an option. They also spoke a lot about what affordable housing means and how even dual income households with 1 or 2 children no longer can afford to work here, which sounds for them just incredible because they grew up their whole lives here. They've been priced out of where they were raised, their parents were raised, their grandparents purchased their first home. And so they really said, hey, listen, we need help too, and we shouldn't have to stay poor and dirt poor to be able to afford to live here, to be able to take advantage of these low income housing options, whether it's rent or to own. There has to be some type of middle included in that, because they're the ones who are selling a lot, especially in the displacement portion when it comes to owning homes in their own neighborhood. Which talks about affordable resale units at the higher income. Equitable access to information translated into Spanish. If there wasn't anything else that we heard first and foremost every single time, we need this information, not just in Spanish, but all languages that are here in this neighborhood. We can't, the most discouraging thing is to have something happening in your neighborhood and you can't understand it. Flyers shouldn't be English first and then Spanish or sub language. It should be either all or that language coming up first to encourage those to participate and know what's happening and be informed and help make these decisions because they're here too. So that was something that, and again, it wasn't just Spanish. Our Spanish-speaking groups were vocal about that for Spanish and other languages, making sure that that information is put out there equitably and easy and accessible. Next, we had affordable live work options are desired. So the desire for local ownership was huge. We don't want to just lease our own land and space back. We want ownership of it. We want to be able to come back and buy some of our space back. We don't want to rent our own land back, right? So that was very important and repeated over and over and over. We want ownership back into this space, into this place. Cultural representation businesses. Okay, so this is also very loud and proud of like, whatever comes into this space needs to be representative of Parkville and all parts of Parkville. And not just for those who we want to attract to Parkville, but those who are here in Parkville who have established businesses, who have established some type of legacy or are trying to create a legacy. There needs to be some type of cultural representation on all fronts for everybody, and it needs to be accessible and equitable. And the desire for long-term affordability for local businesses. So there's a bit of a sentiment, a bit of a worry about, hey, you're going to make it affordable for first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then we're gonna get priced out. And so part of that too feeds back to ownership of this space. You're not just gonna rent it, so I'm gonna have a stake in this, I'm gonna own this. And they also mentioned creating something similar to like the East Coast with like the bodegas, where you have a work and live space. So people who work in this neighborhood also live in that space. You can afford to live in that space, and are proud of that space and brings that back to this neighborhood, or I should say, kind of helps raise that voice and encourage that and create that feeling of pride again, and being able to buy into that again and having that ownership that goes back to that long-term affordability. They don't want to be affordable for the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. They want to be here for the long haul. Key differences that came out. So this was pretty interesting. Our Spanish speaking groups, they desired high density units. So the more people we can fit into the space, the better. They have, multi-generational families, they have large families, they want to be able to be together, have ownership in this space as well. Our English speaking groups are like, absolutely not, that's too much building. We want more of a transitional space. They don't mind 1 or 2 high density buildings, but they don't want people to walk up high density buildings, where it feels like Park Hill has now been boxed in or blocked off to the world because there's this massive high rise in the Colorado Boulevard. So the sentiments were a little bit different in that. They're pretty interesting. Some of that was political, some of that's just desire, some of that was personal inputs, but that was kind of the biggest difference that we saw. But it's also nice to put that too. But the most common thing was inclusiveness, making sure that we're all included in the space culturally, historically, throughout the space, creating things like the 303 Artway that gives nods to different heritages and different people who help create Park Hill. When it's in the spaces, having artwork representative of this space. They talked about including the stories and histories of different, nonprofits and organizations, the Park Hill Fighters and Falcons, this grinds, like making sure this stuff is ingrained into the space, so that when we walk into the space, when we walk into any area of the space, you're in Park Hill, and you're a part of Park Hill, and that this is what Park Hill is. So that was one thing too that came out glaringly loud across all of this. And that is.
Thank you.
Thank you for the overview. Are there any questions for this?
So you mentioned, the people who have been displaced from the neighborhood, those were also engaged. I'm wondering how they were identified and how people, we talk about people sitting in a barber shop or the school, how were these people engaged and identified?
Are you asking how people were displaced engaged?
How did you identify first? I think it's a two-part question. How do you identify that these people have been displaced from here? And secondly, people who have not been, people who don't have will be available at those times or on places. So how do you engage people sitting in a barber shop or waiting at the school or bus stop? Stuff like that.
So for your first question, how do you engage those who've been displaced? That's kind of a question for you guys in the city, right? The community is telling you this is what we want to bring people back home. How do you guys do it? There's not a specific answer for that. They're having to talk about policy of like prioritizing those who can prove lineage, whether it's you have ownership in the space, you can prove that you were here a long-term citizen for whatever that earmark is. The community wasn't determining, they were just determining like we want our families to come back. How we're engaging folks in the community is through our community navigators. So people who live here, who work here, who were part of the process the first round. Those are the people, those are the intentional people who don't engage in this and don't engage online, people who don't know about these things. The intentionality is to make sure those people know and understand, hey, this is happening. And kind of getting those people to be aware and become participatory into the space.
How many people do you interview or talk to?
So we average from 8 to 10 per dialogue conversation, and then each navigator had additional one-on-one conversation. The total number, I'll have to get again. We still have that.
Certainly this is round 2 from the perspective of community navigators, and the purpose in terms of round 2 is to focus more on mix of uses, but during the community navigator process, was it brought as an option at the all meetings? Would you like to see 100% open space, or was that completely excluded from the conversation?
No, absolutely not. And the one thing we did hear, I should say, the one thing we did not hear was no open space. There was understanding that open space is very important across all communities, across all groups that we talked to, even the individuals, that open space is important. And there was no one just particularly stated all open space. But it was also an open question, what your preference is.
I just sort of go negative.
Oh, sorry.
Back and forth, so just to be clear, open space, 100% open space as an option was left on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. What does this look like for you? What does this mean? Do you want to do this, you want to do that? So it was not retracted, like, this is your only option. It wasn't
I want to really quick look online and make sure there aren't any questions from anybody virtually. If you do, would you throw your hand up really quick? Shanta, please.
Hi, just one quick question. I don't know if you've addressed it at all because I cannot hear. But what is the methodology for the outreach of the community navigators? Like, what I guess, what are the methods that are used to make sure that all areas of the community are reached? And do you all count on people to come to you to be engaged, or is there a door-to-door effort? Like what's the method for the outreach?
So yeah,
Because I know people who have never spoken to a community navigator, don't know what a community navigator is, don't know anything about this process. And so I thought that was the objective of the community navigators. So what's the methodology?
yeah, so in the interest of time, we do have an overview on our website that you link, and you're more than welcome to go through that space and read up on what our methodology is and overview. I'm on a limited time, so I would love to have that conversation. I just don't have the time to do that here.
Courtney, could you please share it with the meeting recap as well? Straight meeting members.
So this is online right here. So right here, you see this link. To learn more, go to this link, and then the methodology and all this information is available at this link that you can read through how the navigators are selected, who they represent. This is all available and has been available for over a year on DNCI's website. This is not new information. In the interest of time.
Okay, well, just real quick, just want to say thank you to Anna again. Thank you for the information and the work that you're doing and for coming to report to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we're gonna move forward. We're gonna move forward and start the process overview, and we're gonna have Sarah come up.
Hi, guys. Where should I stand so that people can hear me?
Next
Good, why
Next to
don't you
this.
just, yeah,
Yeah.
and I can move here. Want to do a sound testing of people that are online? Can you hear me okay? David, can you just confirm that you can hear Sarah?
If you could speak up a little bit, that'd be helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna do that loudly. So great to see you guys in person. I've been on all of these meetings virtually for however long it's been now. It's really nice to be in a room with a lot of you. So we're running a little behind schedule and trying to go through this part really quickly. We do have time for a few questions, but if there's a lot of questions, we can document them and follow up with writing with you. So we want to make sure we have time for the real focus of tonight, which is getting to review the draft recommendations. So this graphic that's up right now is a reminder of where we are in the overall timeline for this process. And you can see it says refine recommendations, which is why tonight we're gonna have you start to weigh in on what the plan recommendations might actually be, moving towards a community review of a draft plan later this summer. The next slide This is just showing you a quick recap of each tool or kind of process step that I'm gonna talk about today. We thought it'd be helpful to remind you guys, there's kind of a lot of moving pieces, so wanted to step back for a minute and remind you of the role of the plan we're working on and how it fits together with other pieces. So the first one, we're gonna go to the next slide, is really not a tool itself per se, but it's the name of the process we use. When there's a really large site like this, that might be called large development review or LDR. And it spells out the process that a landowner needs to follow in order to make sure neighborhood priorities are being met. So we use LDR as a city to say, well, if you're interested in developing this piece of land, then here's the roadmap you're gonna need to follow to make sure that all of the steps are met, and adequate community engagement or addressing neighborhood priorities. And then that results in a framework that's called it's basically a roadmap of different tools. If you go to the next slide, the first step in the roadmap for this site is an area plan. So the LDR process, the large development review, that officially started in December when the landowner applied for an LDR. And we, the city, said the first thing you need to do is we've heard from the community, you need to form a vision for what should happen on this property. And that's what you guys are helping us to do.
I'm hearing that it's hard to hear her.
Is that? Yeah, I think the mic is not.
We know
It's, I can see the bar moving, like, it's getting it, it must not be connected.
No, it's.
Well, I just got,
I mean.
I think it's just like how voices carried, because David just texted me and he's like, I can hear you. 10 feet away, so,
Really can't get any closer.
yeah.
Do you think I should sit by your sound or all the sound?
If the sound.
All the sound is coming from there. So just
Okay,
as loud as you can.
okay, so the first step in the LDR process for this property is the plan that we've been talking about with this group. It's a very important step because it is where we ask the community to work with the city and document what should happen here. It is a policy document. It's not actually law that's going to go change what can be developed, but it sets the framework for anything else that would happen in the future. So it is a very critical document. For example, I'll talk about the zoning in a minute. City council, who would make the final decision on any future zoning changes to this site, is legally required to find that the zoning is consistent with the vision in the plan. So the plan, even though it itself is not actually changing the rules, it plays a very, very important role in the overall process of what can happen to the site. It will have maps in it. It will not have an actual site design. That's not the role of the plan to say, this is exactly, this building go here, and this building go here. It's a little higher level than that, but it will have important maps that generally show where different types of heights of buildings should be, where different types of land uses should be. Obviously, for this site, a big thing will be in the plan is where should there be future open space in a regional park. So those are the kind of things that will end up in the plan. It does go to the Denver Planning Board for approval and then City Council for adoption. And another very important tool that we anticipate using here is what we call a development agreement, or a DA for short. This is a legally binding document between the private landowner and the city. And it can add more detail and more commitment than what's in the plan. So it will actually be able to really spell out what are the things that the landowner is responsible for building or delivering if the site redevelops, and provide a lot more detail around that. I will note it runs with the land, which means that even if the current property owner sells the property to somebody else, they would still have to follow within the agreement. So it's a very important document in terms of making sure the city and the community get the commitments to this site. And the development agreement would also go to city council. Our intent is to hopefully have the plan and the development agreement and the zoning about be a package together that would go to city council so the community and city council understand together what the full package is, because they all kind of work together. You go to the zoning, right now, the entire property is zoned what's called OSB, it stands for open space. And the B is because it's privately owned, because land is not owned by the city of Denver. We have a different zone district called OSA for publicly owned parks. And right now, if somebody wanted to build something that wasn't open space, the zoning wouldn't allow it. So you have conservation easement, we'll talk about that, and we just have the zoning. So most likely the landowner will be applying to rezone the parts of the property that won't stay open space, where we want to see buildings and other types of uses coming into play. And so the zoning also goes to the Denver Planning Board and then the city council for final adoption. And like I just said, we'd like to see the zoning and the development agreement and the plans packaged for transparency for the community and city council to really see how it all comes together and understand what the full package of vision for this property would be. Next slide. This one is a little unique. This is cool because this is not something the city requires or is directly involved in, but it can be a very important tool for properties like this one. We know there's already community interest in doing this. It's called a Community Benefits Agreement, or CBA. This is different from a development agreement. Like I mentioned, that's a binding agreement between the city and the private landowner. This is a binding agreement between the private landowner and an organization, or sometimes more than one organization, that represent the community. They negotiate and come into an agreement as well. So as a landowner, Westside would be negotiating with the city for things that they're committing to us, that they will build and deliver on the site. But sometimes there are additional things the community would really like to see that the city is not really in the business of enforcing. There's some examples up there, but one is, let's say, private open space. So the city would certainly be negotiating for what are the public major parks of the regional park that will likely become city owned, and that would get documented in the development. But maybe the community is interested in something like how a private open space might get built or used by the community in the future, and if they can get the private landowner to agree to it, that could live in the CPA. So it doesn't duplicate what's in the development agreement, but it supplements it. It can, oftentimes we'll see CPAs have things about community certain uses, the community wants to see on the site over time, or even sometimes things related to affordable housing that go above and beyond what's already in the commitments to the city. And then the final piece I'll hit on here is, of course, the conservation easement that is on this property. Another step in this big process is addressing that. And so city council would need to refer a ballot question so that in a municipal election, all the voters of Denver would weigh in on whether to remove the easement, either partially or in full. And our hope, why we're doing this process with you, is so we can show the voters what the alternative vision is. So they can weigh in on, should this stay a golf course, and should this easement stay, or should it be this vision that's been documented in the plan and memorialized in more detail in the rezoning and the development. So there's a lot of pieces here, but we thought it would be good to remind everybody, because we're getting close after having a draft of the plan of what the plan does, what its role is in this bigger process with all these different steps. We have a couple minutes for a question or two, great.
Any questions?
We also have Shanta and Pastor Dell.
Let's go with Pastor Dale and then Shanta, and then we'll come into the room. Pastor Dale?
Thank you. I wanted to ask a combo question for clarity. Is this presentation implying that the work of this group is going to formally design the property And if that is true, I'm trying to understand how we got to that point as opposed to the original focus on determining how the property should be utilized in respect to the balancing of open space versus development. And part two to that is, if it is the intent for this committee to actually come up with a design drafting the details, how's that going to happen with such a large group of people to determine what should, how this should be laid out, and how the developer would not have input on that since they are actually the owner of the property? And how would all that get done in time to take it to zoning to make any kind of modifications if you don't have a design?
Yeah, so I'm sorry if you misunderstood, or if I said something that led you to think that. It sounds like your initial impression is correct, which is it's not the role of this group to actually design the property. We're saying the plan will not have a detailed design. It's not going to get to that level to say, we want this kind of building here and this building here. It's going to call out key important things, just like you just summarized it really well. How do we want it to be utilized? In general, where should there be large, regional open space? If there's a really important street connection or something like that, the plan might call for it. But the detailed site design is not the role of the committee. That is actually something that the property owner will lead, to your point. And there's a separate site development plan process by which they will propose a site design that gets reviewed by city staff. There will be a required community information meeting as part of LDR where they'll share their draft site plan for community input. But that is not officially the role of this committee to actually design the site.
Thank you. Shanta?
Hi, you talked about CBAs. I understand that there's already a group meeting discussing CBAs concerning this whole process and outcome. Will that information be shared with the steering committee at any point? What's already been discussed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So from what we've heard, the group that started to meet is still very focused right now on kind of organizing and ground rules and things like that. And we are reaching out to James Roy at the MCI, who's helping to facilitate that conversation, to ask if there's a way we can kind of get updates or what's the best way to share things. And that'll really be up to that group to decide how they want to communicate with this group or other people in the community, because it's really their process, but we're certainly planning to ask that question.
I think that would be great for the sake of transparency.
Yeah, makes sense.
Are we, sorry, I have a question. I kind of like with the same question that I can't remember had at the beginning. Are the voters going to see what we could do with this development if we develop it? Or they also can see the option of what would it look like if it's all full open space 100%? Because I know that there are people in the community and other people that have those visions as well. And I kind of want to make sure it's both represented and not just one that is like, this is what it look like. This is what it, you know what I mean? I feel like if the voters have access to both alternatives of what it would look like as an open space versus, I mean, or is this just, are they just gonna look at like the alternative of like what it would look like as a developed space, I guess?
So in terms of what the plan in this group is focused on is open space plus the other things, right? And that's because we did the visioning process first, where we started with the bigger question of, do we want anything except what's here today? It's 100% open space all for it. And the prevailing vision that came back was, we want a lot of open space, we want other things too, and that's what the plan will really flesh out. Now, of course, the voters could still choose to keep the conservation easement and have it stay 100% open space. That's definitely still on the table, that will be fundamental question. We won't necessarily have a vision of what that looks like because we're focused on what would it look like if we do something more than just the open space, because that's what the community identified they want the vision for the site to be. And also, there's a lot of unknown questions that we don't know the answers to the questions. What would, if it does stay in place, then what happens? Is it privately owned? And there's market reality of paying tax on site and owning it, so that the city's not in a place, for example, it's not our land, to say, oh, okay, so I think that's part of the problem with articulating alternative vision, is it's unclear, we'll kind of get there, if we get there, conservation is not listed, then right now, we're really focused on making sure we flesh out what would happen if it was listed, so the voters are informed on here's the two alternatives. That help?
I think, I want to clarify one thing, just kind of being part of the group and also confirming this. When we talk about design, and we talk about zoning and plan program, there's the zoning that is, we're gonna allow up to 5 stories, and this could be residential only, or it could be mixed use that includes retail. So that's like a zoning element, but the design is not going to be decided that it's a building that has exactly 5,352 square feet.
Correct.
Also, this area has zoning that is retail only, and this program is only 2 stories. So my understanding is that this body, our job is to look at the space and recommend. In this corner of the map, we have zoning that is 5 stories, whatever that zoning is. And we're establishing a program that is possible. And that will include open space that is not 110 acres or whatever the number is, 155. It's 75, whatever the numbers are, we're going to define that repurposed program that then goes to the voters, but it does not have the granularity of it is this specific size for this specific building on each site. That is after. That granularity is years down the road after conservation easement is voted on. But it is a pretty binary vote between the program we create or it stays as is. And that is a whole nother unknown, but it's A or B right now. Not, I just.
Yes, that was a good summary. And the only clarification I get is that sometimes the zoning can solve a lot of flexibility. So it often is focused on the maximum thing that can happen there, the most impactful thing. So the tallest the building could be.
Correct.
Or the most amount of uses that can go there. But for example, you could have a 5-story mixed-use zone district where, for depending on the current landowner or future one, they could still build like a 3-story only residential building, right?
So that's a really good point, and I think it'll be important to explain, and here's a very specific question: can a development agreement say we're zoned for 5 stories, but in the agreement, we're only gonna be 4 here? Because I think, I understand exactly what you mean, maximum allowable versus what we're gonna do. If the zoning code doesn't have a specific smaller restriction that we're gonna do, voters could see alternatively, well, they could do 5 stories on everything, and if that's not our intent, we should be specific what our intent is.
Yes. So we would use, the challenge is the development agreement, both for the public to see it and understand, it's a complicated written legal document, as well as for staff who might, like you said, could be years away for somebody actually comes and builds the building. And so it doesn't work well as a city for you to then go out and find this development agreement and read what it says about how tall the building be there. We like that to live in the zone. So there are tools we can use. Generally, we do have a really good menu of some districts, and that's what the applicant is working on, is picking a menu that matches what this group has said in the plan. And so as much as possible, that would be transparent, actually part of the zone.
And I feel like I kind of want to go with that. I mean, I feel like in Denver, we have very few voters, and if you you just kind of give them this option, they're gonna be like, well, that sounds terrible. And I just wanna make sure that they know that they understand the process and that they, you know, that, kind of like what you said, that there's an agreement between the community and the developer. Because I think otherwise it's just gonna be lost in translation. So.
Yeah, getting that information out would be really important.
So we're gonna go to Roger, and then that'll be the last question for this section. If you have questions, just shoot an email or write it down. So we gotta continue. So Rachel and Pastor Dale, just shoot those questions to Courtney via email, and we'll make sure you get a written response to those. Roger?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for being here. Just for a point of clarity, there's some confusion within the community. It talks about small area plan and large area plan. And so I'm wondering if you show not only the difference in those two, but then also where you believe, say, a land trust and or a 99-year deal would fit in the development agreement or in a CDA.
Okay, so your first question, I'm not sure, when you say large area plan, you mean the large development review, that term, the LDR,
Well,
or?
and that's where it's been very confusing because I've heard the term large area plan, say for instance, with Del West, that's going on 38 for Holland. It's a large area plan, whereas this has been described as a small area plan, it's a much larger parcel. So I'm just looking for some
Okay.
clarity because I'm not sure.
Yep, so I think what might be happening, which makes sense, like, we're planners, we use these terms all the time, so it can get confusing when it's not your world, right? But like the property you mentioned would definitely not be a large area, we don't really have the term a large area plan, I get some people maybe saying that. What they probably mean is, the best thing I think of is the large development review, or the LDR. And that is the name for just a process, and it can cover a site as small as 10 acres and not even need a plan. Here, well, yeah, it could even be 5 acres, it could be 30 acres, there's a whole range of what LDR applies to. And a lot of times with LDR, you don't need a small area plan. And the reason why is the site might be as small as 5 acres, or there's a plan that was already driven by the community, recently adopted. And what the landowner is proposing to do is consistent with that vision. So, you know, box is already checked, we already have a current vision. Here, we know, we proactively knew we need to get the community to the table and talk about what should happen on this property, and that's why we're doing. So again, it's very confusing because it's a small area plan. The reason why it's called small area is because we also do plans for entire neighborhoods bundled together, what's called neighborhood planning or neighbor planning initiative. And that's actually, you know, this site's 155 acres, that will cover tens of thousands of acres because it's an entire neighborhood. It often takes much longer for that reason too. It might be a 2 to 3 year process. So that's why we're using the term small, it's because it's comparing it to that. But it still fits within a large development review process.
So part two?
Oh, say it again, I'm sorry, something about the 99.
Yeah, 99-year, let's say land trust and a 99-year lease, to say that similar to what the Lee and Shai came out with. And then not only will folks be able to come back, but there'll be progression for them, they'll have to be able to say from the condo to a single family home.
Right. I mean, it's tough to say right now, there are components of that, and Brad, you know, again, that are, especially with related to the housing, that may be something that would end up in the agreement with the city to enforce.
Okay.
Depending on exactly what it is and whether it's something the city is equipped to enforce, it could also end up in a CBA.
Thank you.
This is Brad Minnick with Department of Housing Stability, your host. So on the housing front, 99 years is not a standard, Mr. Cobb. So
Right.
regardless of whether it's a land trust or a rental property, revocation fee, that's our standard. On the business side, we don't have those functionalities and tools yet, so that's likely something that hopefully would be in the community benefits agreement or some other term that, you know, made, because we don't have the mechanisms to enforce that the way that we do housing.
And your last name again, Brad?
Wyman, WDINIG.
Thank you.
So Roger, my experience with Brad is in the land trust world, and a lot of times, if you get to a private or a nonprofit land trust that's on land, there are covenants there that can allow for exactly what you said, family inheritance, you can stay with the family. So there's ways to do that. privately or with a nonprofit.
Slash CBA.
So I'm gonna stop us there. Great conversation, but we're running. And so.
As we get to the room.
Yeah, this is good, I like it, but I also wanna make sure you guys go home and eat and live. Any additional comments or questions, just write them down or shoot them via email, we'll make sure that you get a written response. And we're gonna move to the selected draft plan recommendation review and activity. Some discussion, we're gonna start that with Courtney.
Thank you, and I'm so sorry I cut that short. Thank you, Sarah. So I'm gonna explain. I just figured I'm loud. I'm annoyingly loud. Ask any of my coworkers. They can hear me all the way down the hall in the web building. So I'm kind of known for it, but so I'm gonna give a brief overview of this activity that you'll be doing here tonight in person. Also, you'll be doing that virtually. Let me actually video too, so people at home can see me. So these are example draft recommendations related to mobility, quality life infrastructure, and land use built form, the three elements that make up a complete neighborhood found in Blueprint Denver. These recommendations that you see on the board and you'll see in your Miro board for those who are connecting virtually, those came from past community input. And so for maybe 30 minutes, and I have to cut it a little bit shorter, you'll review each board. There's some sticky notes right there. Write your comments, write your questions. We'll have staff members floating around. So if you have questions, we can have a discussion kind of one-on-one, but we'll be able to do that. Those at home, you'll be using the Miro board. And when I say those at home, I mean steering committee members. The broader public will have an opportunity to do this activity on June 30th at the Park Hill Golf Course Clubhouse right here at the open house, and they'll be able to come drop in anytime between 3 and 7. We're asking folks to sign up online just for spacing, social distancing, an RSVP time slot, but please come, and it's self-guided, and we'll have staff here to be able to walk you through the same activity. So this is not your only bite at the apple. So after we do this commenting and review, we'll come back together and discuss as a group. Again, this might have to be a little bit more truncated. We have 30 minutes. Might be, 15 will depend on time. Dr. Ross, I'll leave that to you. And before we get into that, you'll see one of these boards here looks a little bit different than the other. The ones with the maps on, that's landscape mode. It's a little bit more confusing, so I want to take a few minutes just to walk through what you're looking at, so you understand when you're making comments. So right here, this is the board I'm talking about. So the Park Hill Golf Course Area Plan, as Sarah explained, will have recommendations on neighborhood context, places, place designations, and maximum heights for the property. And so I want to provide an overview of what those are. So when you're making comments, you can make informed comments. So first we'll start with neighborhood context. Blueprint Denver and the zoning code are organized by neighborhood context. This is an organizational structure that sets a framework for how we understand the built environment and differences between neighborhoods. So for example, downtown, higher buildings, higher intensity, good access to transit. That's in the downtown context. In contrast to look at places like Montbello neighborhood, curvilinear streets, different field, different scale, different pattern in development. So there's different contexts ranging from suburban to downtown, and then we have districts, and that has a lot of different things encapsulated in that context, like industrial, regional parks, institutional uses. For the Park Hill Golf Course site, new future neighborhood context will set kind of a framework of appropriate development scale for and types. And just so you understand, when you look at the context map, that's the first one on the left over there, that open parks and open space exists in all neighborhood contexts. This is an example. So the park just to the south of us right here, that's in the urban edge context. It doesn't get its own little special little park context. It is within the urban edge context. For the Park Hill Golf Course site, these maps that you'll see is proposing the future neighborhood context. What we have here along Colorado Boulevard and then going in where the main street is the urban center context, high mix of uses, multi-story buildings, multi-use buildings located close to the street, excellent access to transit. And we have the general urban context. That's the lighter beige color. It serves as a transition from that higher urban center context to the district context. And districts, they're just places with a specifically designed purpose, such as regional parks or industrial areas. But in this case, we're talking about a regional park for that district. Future places are a framework to describe various scales and types of development that characterize a city. Each place type expresses itself differently depending on the neighborhood context where it's located. For the Park Hill Golf Course site, based on what we heard from the community center place is mapped along Colorado Boulevard and where 38th Avenue would come through on that future Main Street. Community centers are mixed use places, residential use, commercial uses, places where people go to engage in social activities, entertainment, dining, shopping. Those are your community centers, but it can have residential uses. Residential high medium, that's going to be within the general urban context, predominantly multi-story buildings. They're located close to centers. While the focus is residential, they can include some neighborhood serving uses, typically on the ground floor. So it's not exclusively residential, but it's predominantly residential. And then we have the regional park place. That's a regional scale consolidated open space. And then, so the draft maximum building heights map, taller, so we have here taller buildings in the northwest corner of the site, closest to 40th and Colorado Station, up to 12 stories. Then the height is decreasing as we go east and south, 8 stories, 5 stories right here. Then the lightest color is up to 3 stories on the south side. So the property owner actually has some additional thoughts about the 3-story height. And we wanted to turn it over to Kenneth to kind of talk about heights from their perspective and 4 stories potentially. And I can let you control this if you'd like. Yeah. Yeah, you can come from here if you like.
So one of the things that, we wanted to start from is we've heard a lot of status values about wanting more park, wanting to support community preservation, avoid displacement, a lot of things that we just heard from Anna. And we think that one of the best ways to accomplish that is by encouraging affordability and decreasing the footprint of development, right? And a lot of that is kind of the trade-off that we've been talking about in other meetings about how high you go versus how much you spread out, right? And so this question of 3 or 4 stories, I'm providing some pictures of just a variety of different 3 and 4 story buildings. When you're looking at what we have here, do you know which of these buildings is 3 stories or 4 stories? It's actually the one in the foreground that it's kind of 3.5 stories, right? And then you also see in the background it's 3.5 stories. And oops.
Yeah, you used to
Right click.
Roll the ball.
Yeah. Right. So this is another example of that 3.5 story, but different materiality. This is an example of a 3 story with different materiality with a 3.5 story behind it. Okay. Here's masonry where you have kind of 3.5 stories in front of a larger building, so it creates more of a human scale on the street, and that's basically what you have is a setback where you have a 6-story building in back of it. These are renderings actually of stacked townhomes. And stacked townhomes means you have like a 2-story townhome and then a 2-story townhome on top of it. The reason you'd ask, why do you do that? Well, in Denver right now, the larger a unit is, the more expensive, well, anyway, the larger a unit is, the more expensive it is. And in doing this, you can actually share a foundation, and share a roof, while also having a family-sized unit, right? So you can do 2 1,400 square foot units that can be 3 or 4 bedrooms, as opposed to 1 3,000 square foot unit or 1 2,800 square foot unit, which pricing wise, right, goes into where we're talking about kind of standalone prices in Denver, which right now are approaching $1 million each unit, right? So this allows for more efficiency and more affordability. It also, this is a 4-story, you know, again, masonry, different things. And one of the things that the 4 stories in this format allows is kind of how it meets the street differently, right? So these are more townhomes where it actually spills out onto the street itself. You can have front yards or stoops. And you can, you know, again, you can see that it kind of has a garden level that allows you to kind of step up and while you're a little bit away from the street, it's still a very active street frontage. This is again where they actually have, what you see in the front is actually some stormwater retention, that kind of green landscaping to incorporate that into the whole design as well. This is a 3-story that has a lot of building articulation on the front of it, right, with a more modern kind of a look. This is where you're similar. It can be a 3-story, 3.5-story, where you actually have outdoor spaces on the roofs, which also allows for a different kind of experience out there as well. And then this one, again, actually the building on the right is 3 stories and the building on the left is 4 stories. We kind of can't tell the difference between them. But at the same time, and again, you know, each of these are different designs and different types of things, but the key between 3 and 4 stories, and the reason why we're talking about it, is because you can build all of these with wood as opposed to going with concrete. The other thing that you can do with 3 and 4 stories, while we didn't talk about it, is potentially having the ground floor be that live, work, or retail space. That, you know, again, this is kind of one of those things that, but the key is that variety actually matters, right? And that if we look at everything as just 3 stories, you know, there's attractive 3 stories and unattractive 3 stories. There's attractive 4 stories and unattractive 4 stories. So I think as we're looking at, what we're trying to say is there are a lot of different thoughts about, you know, whether about building heights, stories, that sort of thing. And I just wanted to show a bunch of these different images to give you guys some context and then hear from you if there's a preference, either in terms of materiality or design, or in terms of height or storage, I guess, right? A proxy for height and storage. But as you can see, that's not always the case. And that's what I'm trying to get at when we're, you know, when we go into, as Sean was talking about, different zoning categories, we can, you know, there's this thing where you go up to, but you can certainly limit that, limit it below, or have more building articulation to design that. So anyway, I'll stop there and let you guys ask any questions or give any thoughts. I'd really be more interested in thoughts. These are none of the buildings that, none of these are my projects, but they're just representative of different projects that are out there.
In terms of Cheeseman Park, how many stories do we have?
So Mama Lee asked, how many stories do they have surrounding Cheeseman Park? The tallest buildings, I believe, are 18 stories, and then they go down to probably 3-story buildings, but the predominant are probably 5, 8, 18, that kind of scale.
I noticed you had shown me thing
Yeah, this shows, for example, this image shows a little bit of what the difference is and, you know, how you can scale it. This,
Kenneth, could you go to the map?
Yeah, go.
Discussion. Sure. Maybe show where. How this relates to, how this relates to the colors.
Right, so right here, we see the lightest purple, that is up to 3 stories shown. The next would be up to 5 stories, then the next darker color up to 8 stories, and up to 12 stories. So during this exercise, if you guys have opinions after what you've heard from Kenneth, put that on the board of like what your thoughts are, what your questions are. Those who are connecting with us virtually, you'll have the opportunity to do the same thing about weigh in on what heights you feel like are appropriate.
and I think that what our thought at least is, and what this reflects, not entirely, that map doesn't entirely reflect that we think as you approach, whether it's the regional park or any park spaces or open spaces within this larger site, that we have probably a step down to a 4-story, even if it's an 8-story building, that we would approach the ground floor with a step back that would start probably at a 3rd or 4th story in order to create that better scale and address the park in a more human way. And so that image that I was just showing, that one, right, kind of shows how you can articulate a building, right, so that it makes this is in a zone that allows for obviously a much taller height, but you, by articulating it, it means that on the ground floor, you're going to be having more of a smaller 3.5 or 4-story experience with more height behind you. And again, the overall thing is, you know, there's a design component here, but there's also an overall affordability component, as well as making sure that we can, have enough activation on the site with a smaller footprint as you go to higher density or maybe higher height or higher stories for the buildings itself.
Can you restate that issue around wood and the being 4 stories and kind of clarify that? I think I understand what you're saying, but I want to make sure I do.
Yeah, so once you go, if you can build a 5-story building with wood, it becomes a lot more expensive just because of structural factors. But 3 and 4-story buildings tend to be the cheapest to build. It's not that they're the cheapest that they're cheapest looking. It's just they're the cheapest to build because you're using wood as its framework. The difference between 3 and 4 stories right now is that a 4-story building requires an elevator, and in fact, in a lot of if you're only accessing it from a ground floor, and that also, so those have to do with, you know, affordability as well as the scale of buildings. And the reason why the 3.5 or 4 stories allows more flexibility is because it can kind of stack things on top of each other while still maintaining a very accessible and very friendly kind of street.
So after 4, you're doing more masonry.
You tend to, then it's more, you need a concrete podium typically, that then we put wood construction on top of, and that usually goes up to 7 stories. And then beyond that, you usually go to a steel and construction, or steel and concrete rather, construction type. And each of those has, you think about it, kind of just increases in cost as you go up from there. From one of it's kind of type 5, type 3, type 2, type 1, and as you go up that scale, it gets more expensive per square foot.
And so as you can see here, we already have our virtual steering committee members who have moved on to the board exercise.
Glad they're listening to it. But any other questions? I appreciate, you know, and obviously we can talk more about it, but I just wanted to give that context because it's hard to translate between a block and map and kind of thinking about, testing.
And so for the virtual folks, you should have received a link to this Mira board from Dr. Ross on Friday. Please go in your email and click on that link and connect to the Mira board and start providing your comments. With that, we'll leave it to the the steering committee members that are here to come up and take a look at each of these boards. And if there's a specific topic that's of interest to you, like let's say you're very interested in the quality of life recommendations, which are around parks, open space. You might want to start there. If you're very interested in building heights, because we've got your attention, go to that landscape board with the maps on it. And there's sticky notes right there, pens and pencils, and please. And what, Dr. Ross, how much time do we have?
20 minutes.
20 minutes, and we'll be at 6:00 or 7:05.
And then, yeah, the last 20 minutes.
Well, but then we have public comment. Okay.
So 7:05.
7:05.
Yeah.
For those joining us virtually, this is a 2-minute warning. We're gonna come back together for discussion.
That was pretty cool.
At 7:10.
Yeah, no, yeah. All right, folks. Let's come back together. Yeah.
Are we unmuted?
We are.
Yes.
Okay. So, we're gonna come back and convene here for some conversation, thoughts, some of the things that you've seen, maybe additional questions that you might have now. I'm gonna go to the folks online first. See if we have any hands up or comments. And Shanta, is your hand up or is that from earlier?
Sorry, that was from earlier.
Okay, no sweat.
Okay.
So, for our steering committee members who are virtual, any questions, comments, after going through the activity virtually? Okay, I'll check back in a second, but seeing none, shift back to the room here. Thoughts, response, reactions, questions?
I just have a question.
Yes. Patty, and then-
Yeah, I feel like I just, you guys might want to put the park back in the Colorado Boulevard area and the Dahlia Street will be open. And I just feel like we already had discussed those things and like that we weren't gonna do that, so can you just explain like the change and like I don't think that's what the community wanted.
I remember that.
So I feel like you guys already did noticing it, or like, I don't know, this is just like, doesn't matter what we want.
No, it definitely does. We'll take it. We've noted that the Dahlia connection is something that there's many various opinions about that connectivity.
So where did that come from? Is there any reasoning behind? Because we talked about this was on the previous meetings on the sidewalks that we have done.
Well, I know, I think we did mention it on the site walk when we talked about it going through, and then we also talked that at the previous meeting, it was showing Dahlia going through, but there was different comments about Dahlia connecting all the way through from 38th to 39th, I believe. So if that's.
My recollection is that the comments from the city, from the comments from the community are not there.
Okay.
Comments from the community were consistent, yes, that it should not go through.
And these are different, steering committee members who are from different neighborhoods, so I think there was general consensus among the steering committee members that Dahlia should not be a street.
Do you want to maybe just, I think it's helpful to be clear, like, why are some of the reasons why it's at least an idea, to help us explain like why connection. I've heard from this group that you don't want to just explain, like, it's not like why it's on the map.
Right. I think that there is a need for our network connectivity for that north to south connection on Dahlia. For the truck traffic and to keep our network together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is a desire on the part of the city to provide a connected grid, so that's why it falls under policy one, develop a street grid. Definitely understand that the community did not want that connection earlier. There is a policy under policy 2 there that says, if that is to be constructed, it needs to be constructed in a way that discourages pass-through traffic for trucks. It slows speeds, it is more pedestrian and bike focused rather than vehicle focused. But I definitely understand the desire of folks to not have that connection.
I also don't see on the map there.
This is sorry, I'm looking for it right now. This is the open space map.
So who enforces that it can't be a passenger for trucks? Does it just put a sign up and say, okay, come to your own risk?
Yeah, there's a couple ways to establish a truck route. Usually you need to do a pretty thorough traffic study, designate it, and then obviously there's the enforcement side. But from a physical design standpoint, you can do things within it that would discourage those movements, making it harder for trucks to go through. But it would be a process with the city to establish a designated truck route.
So that would tell you that the street that's in front of my community, like 40th and Smith, is supposed to be no trucks.
And there's
The city
trucks all day,
never, the city never enforces anything. The trucks come barreling through there, but no one does it.
Understood.
So what I'm hearing is that the city says, well, we have a policy, and we have policy number 1, we have policy number 2, and this is what the city's gonna do. Even when the community is unanimous in saying, don't do this, it's gonna harm our community.
Very well said.
Thank you.
So if that is now going to be what is proposed for the community-led program for this site, those two things are in direct conflict with each other. So I don't believe that the community proposal should have something that the community is completely against. The city is trying to put this on and saying this is part of the community proposal, and that is not true.
So I think these are draft recommendations. We've heard very clearly tonight that there is not favor for that recommendation. So we need to go back to the people who manage our transportation system in the city and share that and talk about what can we do given this input.
It's really very unfortunate that, we're rehashing this thing again, and there were 4 people, 5 people here in the room that said absolutely not, and so now we've got to go back and I guess look at the policy, is what you're saying?
And to add to Roger's point, they just finished redoing the I-70. Why is city not talking to other agencies, and why is everything being thought about after the fact that they have done a major overhaul of the project? It's the same situation, the Steel Street, you resurface the entire street and it's like, okay, no construction happening now, everybody wants to do water line replacement and whatever, and nobody is talking to each other.
David, I want to let you jump in here.
Yeah, sorry, and I'm missing some of this conversation, so I wish I was there to really listen, but I just wanted to bring up, I understand the kind of the pushback on Dahlia, but I just wanted to explain a little bit on maybe the opportunity there for that to be access to the new regional park from the east and the neighborhood. So I understand that there's a balance there and there's some challenges, but also the opportunity to actually improve the access for that neighborhood. I don't know if you'd really want an access right at 38th and Dahlia. You'd rather have it a little bit further north, and I think you could design that street to really enhance the access into the park for all modes. So I think there's a lot more thought that would need to be put into this, but I also want to acknowledge what we're hearing. So I just wanted to make sure that was out there.
Other thoughts on this? Well, Iman, and then we'll come back.
Community benefits agreement, that still has to be taken into account. And what timeline we looking at in terms of that?
So my understanding is there's another group that's doing that. That's not this group. They're separate. But somebody wants to speak to me about CBA,
About,
just their timeline or.
And so unfortunately, we don't know because it's not a city. Should I get close to the microphone?
Yeah.
I feel bad for the people that are.
So essentially, you're saying that it's not a city process, it's a private process, and we're gotta wait for them to tell us what they think.
Right. We're gonna, I think it makes a lot of sense. A couple people tonight have mentioned wanting to know more about that, which we totally agree. So we're gonna, I mentioned before, James Roy with the MCI is helping to organize that conversation. So we will reach out to him and see if he, like, to me, I think the best thing would be for him to come share with this group. But I don't know where that will land, but we'll certainly ask. And in the meantime, I think you all can also feel free to reach out to him directly too and try to get more information. But we'll definitely do that and try to work back.
Just to let you guys know, I did ask.
I thank you for mentioning that, Sade, because I forgot to tell you all, I put them out by your spots, but we made this handout to explain what a CBA is versus what a development agreement is. And I found it under resources, side overview of CBAs, there's actually 2 websites. So we can send, we'll still through Courtney, we can send you direct links, because sometimes that's easier than having to remember to bring this home and type it into your computer. So we will do that, and you can look at some examples of kind of model CBAs that are out there throughout the country.
Yeah, actually, I was involved in one of the first CBAs that was done as part of the Gates Pro Factory redevelopment, and I know it's on the website that it was done, so I'm happy to do that. With regard to that, all I would say is I'm happy to start any CBA as soon as they're ready. But today I have not mentioned.
The overall plan, just to clarify, that we'll have a proposal, there'll be a CBA, there'll be a development agreement, and like, we're gonna have the full package before it goes. So, yeah, I mean, we all are limited resources, but I think it's for our own personal selves, but I think we're gonna need to know that everybody's aligned. In some way, I don't know how to do that. Said that quite
All right, we're gonna come back to the comment. Did you still have a comment?
No, I just wanted to mention that, as part of future development, I know I mentioned this before, is that a traffic study will be part of those processes in the future, and it would really look at kind of the impacts of some of those connections. Obviously, before we get to that point, we'll take the feedback that we heard today and bring that back to the transportation folks and have that discussion.
Other questions, thoughts, comments? And I'm looking online as well, folks, so if you have your hand up. Everybody good? Okay. Well, we've got a few minutes left, and so we'll go to a few of our public comments. We're gonna have several that get pushed to next month's meeting, just in the interest of time. All of the folks who have signed up for public comment, I've emailed them already while we were here, just letting them know, prepping them that a few may not make it tonight and that they're invited to, they'll automatically be included on the list for next month. And so first up, we've got Amy Harris.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Amy, you've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Amy Harris, and I live here in Northeast Park Hill. The stunned silence of the steering committee at the last meeting when they first heard about the proposal for multiple 12-story apartment buildings really tells you all you need to know about this plan. And that's that it's wrong for our community. One of the most egregious effects is to totally block our mountain views. And speaking as a 5th generation Coloradan, the mountains are crucial to our identity. And you ask any Denverite for directions and they'll always tell you to look to the mountains. And that's going to be taken away from us with this plan. Northeast Park Hill is going to welcome at least another 750 residents after affordable housing is built at 38th and Holly. The Urban Land Conservancy wants to build multiple 8-story towers of affordable housing at 40th and Colorado. These additional residents will put even more pressure on the frankly pitiful amount of green space that's available in Northeast Park Hill. We already have a town center in Northeast Park Hill. It's where we have our library, our rec center, and well-loved establishments like the Blazing Chicken Shack. And recently we learned that an organization called the Rocky Mountain Food Collaborative is serious about opening up a large food market in that area, offering fresh produce and meat directly from Colorado ranchers and farmers. Let's support that project. We do not have to go along with this plan to tear up the conservation easement. We hold the power because it's only through a citywide vote that the trees and grass would be paved over in favor of dense residential housing. None of the plans offered by the city and its client Westside are suitable for Northeast Park Hill. Instead, what we should do is support the growth of our already existing town center and use the tens of millions of dollars of annual revenue generated from Initiative 2A to turn the Park Hill Golf Course land into a park with amenities that serve our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Alex Walsh.
Hello. All right. So, yeah, this is all just a giant waste of time. It's clear from sitting in on this meeting that the people participating don't even know what the heck they're doing. You know, every single plan, you know, from the city here, the plan cannot include 100% open space because we said so. Like, what is that? Trying not to get mad, just disappointed in this quote unquote process. So whatever BS plan you put forward on a ballot, you can bet your asses that I'm going to be out there spending a lot of time and a lot of money making sure it doesn't pass. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm John Sleeman. I live in the City Park neighborhood, City Park South. My comment is that I'm really disappointed that the conservation easement has never been the subject of meaningful discussion during this process. The land is currently covered by the conservation easement, and regardless of what the survey may have shown, I think it's irresponsible to have gone so far down the road without having a plan that considers that the conservation easement remain in place. There are many things that could be done with this open space, left as open space, that would be of great value to the community. And I remain continuously disappointed that nothing the committee has talked about, as far as I've been able to see, includes a plan that says the conservation easement remains in place and the open space remains as open space. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ryan. My name is Mary Frances Nevins from District 9. Thank you, committee members, for your service on the committee. However, it appears that CPD handpicked the steering committee to have a significant majority who, from the beginning, have supported breaking the conservation easement and having the land developed. It seems that Westside Investment Properties is CPD's client rather than Denver citizens, most importantly those who live in the neighborhood of the Park Hill Golf Course. I live in District 9, where my family has lived for over 100 years. For the record, we believe there has been no meaningful discussion of the conservation easement that protects all of the Park Hill Golf Course land from development, nor has there been meaningful discussion of climate change and the health and environmental benefits of maintaining the 155 acres as open space. Last year, Denver ranked among the top 12 cities in the world for the worst air pollution. We cannot afford to use extremely scarce open space for development when developers can build on existing developed space. Finally, ballot initiative 301 reflects the opposition by citizens to building on one of the last remaining open spaces in Denver. This seems to be ignored, and plans are moving forward as if this did not pass with an overwhelming vote of Denver citizens. Thank you.
Are we supposed to be hearing something right now?
Yeah, Shanta, I'm not, I heard the speakers, but I can't hear Dr. Ross or Courtney.
Yeah.
Yeah, hello there. This is David Gaspers. I'm still here virtual, but I think we have finally lost the folks in the clubhouse.
Can you hear me?
Can anybody in the clubhouse hear us? Perfect. We now see you. We can't hear you. Okay, looks like I've confirmed that they are not hearing anything in the, or maybe they are, I don't know, but if I brought up our speaker sign up, and I believe we left off with Mary Frances. If Sandra Robnett is still on, she would have 2 minutes to speak. Let's see if I can find her.
So nobody in the clubhouse can hear, and you're still going to continue on?
Well, I mean, that was I don't know. They might be able to hear us. I'm not for certain, but this is still recording. So if their folks would like to have their comments recorded, we still have that opportunity. I don't see Sandy on here. Woody Garnsey, I do see on the list. Woody, would you still like to make your comment?
Yes.
Please go ahead, and you got 2 minutes.
This is Woody Garnsey. This has been a sham planning process conceived and implemented by CPD with the predetermined outcome of supporting the development plans of its client Westside. I use the word client because CPD documents establish that its executive director and her staff consider Westside, not Denver citizens and taxpayers, to be CPD's client in this planning process. CPD has spent hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars and devoted thousands of CPD staff hours to this effort. In early 2021, CPD began a visioning process with its hand-picked pro-development steering committee. And in late 2021, CPD unilaterally decided to entirely ignore the conservation easement and move forward with mixed residential and commercial development area plan. CPD is now working toward adoption of an area plan. I could say a lot about all the specific problems with this process. I can only highlight a few in 2 minutes. There's been no meaningful discussion of the conservation easement. Next, CPD has committed planning malpractice by only including the 155 acres of the Park Hill Golf Course land in the proposed area plan while ignoring areas near the land, including, most importantly, the areas near the 40th and Colorado A-line station that will have massive dense residential and commercial development. There's been no traffic impact study. There's been no meaningful discussion of climate change and the health and environmental benefits of maintaining the 155 acres of open space. And CPD's survey was an invalid push survey designed to support pro-development outcomes. And finally, why is CPD working for real estate developer Westside and not for Denver citizens and taxpayers? Thank you.
David, you were on mute if you just said something.
Sorry, I'm trying to put Maria, you're up next.
Yes, this is Maria Flora. I'm really sorry, I heard very little of the meeting tonight, so I'm not sure what happened. I saw some pretty pictures from Westside, and I saw shrinking park space. Our community wants open space. You can tell that from the vote last fall on 301 and 302, and from the independent valid survey conducted by the Greater Park Hill community. We're talking about maybe a community benefits agreement or some zoning changes that might be reliable, but we already have a binding agreement. We have a conservation easement that is intended to provide open space and recreation in perpetuity. It can't be released unless the conservation purposes are proven in court to be impossible, and that is simply not the case. It's hard to predict what might be on the ballot. It's hard to know what we might end up with. We're talking about yet another secret process to negotiate a community benefits agreement that leaves everything up in the air. What we do know is there is a mini city that will be developed around the 40th and Colorado station with no open space promised. We do know about the Urban Land Conservancy project at 40th and Colorado that Amy Harris described. Will Waglander appeared at Greater Park Hill on behalf of Urban Land Conservancy. He also works for David Evans and Associates, which has done much of this planning process from the city. So I guess they have this whole part of the city locked in. But he did say there will be a lot of families and they're gonna need safe space and amenities. That comes from David Evans and Associates. Del West, Amy mentioned their development at 38th and Holly, 253 units. Both Urban Land Conservancy and Del West are only willing to say that they will provide the minimum 10% open space that's required by the city for all of those people that are going to be living in those communities. I urge the committee
Okay,
and
that's your
community
2
planning
minutes.
and development to think about the future.
Thank you, Maria. Appreciate it. Next up we have is Joe Morrow. Joe, you still there?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity to comment. You should know the sound quality of this meeting has been terrible. Only about 50% has been decipherable. The rest has been an incoherent jumble and a disservice to those of us listening and the community involved in this process. Much has been said this evening about the existing legal conservation easement and the need to address usage of the Park Hill Golf Course space for all Denverites, and not just those in the immediate surrounding communities. This land belongs to all of Denver, not just a select few. I want to introduce another concept that has to be taken into consideration when talking of what to do with this 155 acres of open space. Parks and green belts act as sinks for carbon dioxide and counteract the urban heat island effect of large built-up areas. Urban forests are known to absorb 200 to 300 tons of carbon per acre per year, and as such represent a huge potential for climate change-related mitigation benefits. A Climate Central report released in 2021 shows that Denver is, on average, 5 degrees hotter than its surrounding areas. Given the recent heat wave and the record-breaking temperatures, we are experiencing these effects right now. The findings show highly developed urban areas can experience mid-afternoon temperatures that are 15 to 20 degrees warmer than the surrounding more vegetated areas. And with climate change worsening extreme heat events, the city can only expect these numbers to increase. Data mapped by the city show that Denver is hotter in places where people are less likely to be white and more likely to earn less than people living in other neighborhoods. This is Northeast Park Hill. A lack of heat deflecting greenery and a prevalence of heat absorbing asphalt and concrete contribute to the heat island effect, which the EPA says can render a city warmer than its surroundings by a difference of 5 degrees. Gentrifying neighborhoods lose trees and become hotter. Urban open spaces provide various benefits to large populations in cities like Denver. Thermally comfortable urban open spaces improve the quality of urban living. The developers and the city's plan as presented
Joe, that's your 2 minutes.
says there's a lot of open space, but that's disingenuous. Denver needs to address this to its chance to impact climate change. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
You
You're on
muted
mute,
yourself, David.
Sorry, apologize about that. I don't believe we have Robert Greer or Jeff Pushet here at all. So I think that's the last of our public comments. And Noah, you have your hand up. Did you want to add something really quick before we close out?
Yeah, quickly. I hope that we can encourage, maybe send an email or something to the public commenters. I know that we lost, more than half of the attendees. And I know there was like some snafus with the in-person group. So I hope that we can just encourage folks that deliver that as public comments. One, maybe even to email them to, that we can get them, if they have those comments they'd like to share in writing with the steering committee, and also encourage them to, if they'd be willing to speak at the next meeting as well. Because I think that we want to make sure that they get their voices heard from everyone on the steering committee.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Noah. Well, we'll wrap this up. This recording will be available online after this meeting, and the next Park Hill Steering Committee meeting scheduled for Tuesday, July 19th as of right now. And keep in mind, we have the community open house at the Park Hill Golf Course Clubhouse on June 30th, Thursday, June 30th. Thanks so much for joining us, and take care.